Hi, I'm Sally Fawkes and I'm an artist maker creating in cast glass. I'm based in Stroud, Gloucestershire in the UK. I've been working here since 1999 and I share my studio with my husband and fellow glassmaker, Rich Jackson. So we both work independently on our solo work and we also work collaboratively. We have quite a large studio. We've built it up over 20 years and it's on an industrial estate. So if you can hear noises in the background, that's because all the businesses around us are working too. I refer to myself as an artist maker primarily because I'm integrating my ideas with material mastery. It was my ideas that led me to glass. And my glass has developed, the objects that I'm making have developed in line with my ideas and experimenting to find processes and outcomes that reflect what I'm trying to say in my glass. Those objects reach the public either through exhibition or through sale commissions. And I work with galleries in this country, in the UK, but also internationally, and get invited to exhibit in museums. I've had a solo show in a museum in France, which was a fantastic experience. It was a real highlight because it was the first time I'd had an exhibition actually designed by a full-on museum exhibition designer and big catalogue. So I came to doing what I do now, not through a straight, necessarily conventional route, but I had done the usual sort of education. I'd done my foundation course in art and design, and I was quite interested in textiles at the time, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, so I didn't go to college at that point. So I went to work for a number of years in the fashion industry up in London, and I got to a point where I wasn't really happy with working in the fast fashion industry. But at the same time, I was doing a lot of evening classes in painting, drawing, and one day I discovered glass in the British Museum, and it was a real moment, a real light bulb moment, like, it's glass, wow, this is incredible. And it was an Egyptian inlay of pictures, but an inlay sort of almost put together like a jigsaw puzzle, and they were little tiny pieces of cast glass. So then, from then on, glass became a bit of an obsession for me, and I was researching into glass and finding out as much as possible. I went to the Crafts Council Resource Centre, and I did some evening classes. I did one in stained glass, and I found after my first lesson I was starting to build in 3 dimensions. Where everyone else was making flat pieces of glass, I was trying somehow to assemble these pieces of glass. So eventually I went to study glass full-time at Surrey Institute of Art and Design, and that was where I really developed what I was trying to do with my glass. So when I was there, I actually did explore all of the different options that were available in glass, and I went to work in Norway in a blowing factory for a while. But ultimately, at that point, I knew I wanted to make one-off objects, and I wasn't going to be a production worker. It was really very much about integrating the ideas into the artworks. So after college, I was quite lucky. I got a job working with Colin Reid. He's another glass maker, and he's based in Stroud, and that's how I've come to be in Stroud. It was a fantastic experience, so you could say it was not quite an internship. I worked 4 days a week for Colin, 1 day a week for myself, and I was able to get a body of work together. So I'd had interest from my degree show from galleries, and they'd said, to come back, and they'd love to see what I made. So that's precisely what I did. I was very fortunate for Adrian Sassoon in London to respond very positively with my work, and I've had my work with him ever since. I also received a grant from the Crafts Council for setting up in business, which was an amazing boost at the start of my career, which meant I could start setting up a studio. People very often ask primarily about the technique of what I make, But for me, the ideas are a very important part of it, and I try and integrate the ideas into my approach to the making and into the final objects. So ultimately, what I've always been trying to express is complexity, how everything is interconnected and how those interconnections have an impact on the outcomes and how the past, present and future links. Every piece that I do will generally have some form of development or experimentation in it, and I think that's how I keep things developing. It's incremental, and it has been over the time I've been making. And on the painted surfaces, for instance, I started off as they were monochrome, they were black, and then I went into using single colour and developing how I used it and the textures that I could achieve in it. And very much now I'm working on the polychromatic painted surfaces, those layers of history and time and place all coming together to form something new. Your ideas are always ahead of what you can make, so it's a bit of a game of catch up, and there's always ideas or aspects of making that you think, oh, I'd really like to try that, but sometimes it's years until you get the opportunity. And again, that's that seesaw of movement of time. And I suppose that's how you sustain your creativity, or I sustain my creativity, because you're always looking, you're always seeing, you're always notating. If you don't notate at the time you see it, you've missed your opportunity. My foundation course was very much based around drawing, and I did an awful lot of location drawing. So I would go out and I would did a lot of drawing from a high-rise multi-storey car park, and I would often go back to the same location. So it was what was happening in that location and how it would be different every day. And so I was looking at what was changing in the human environment, but also how that interacted with what was happening with the natural environment. I still do as much location drawing as possible. And I used to kind of sort of worry about, why am I drawing this? But now I don't. If it interests me, I'll photograph it, I'll draw it, I'll pick it up. And then what I found is that it's a very, very long process, and something that I may have witnessed 15 years ago might come into an artwork now. So these are some drawings that I did in Budapest, and looking at patterning within a site that has been a church, synagogue and a mosque, and how those have overwritten each other, and the detail and patterning and that sort of cross connections, and how the layering has created what it is today. So I'm interested in these sorts of details, just picking up there on shadows and how they play against the wall. This is one of my favourite objects. I don't actually know why, but I think it's that sort of texture that's underfoot. This Marlborough packet I picked up, how many people have trodden on it, and what was it before it was trodden on? And these things all come together to inform what I'm making. So early on, my research was much more interactions with the physicality, but then it has more recently moved beyond that, and now I'm very interested in the impact that science is having on what we understand. And there's something about glass which is very much, it does take you beyond reality and what we can comprehend. And for me, that's very important in my ideas, that everything is much bigger than we are. There's one piece I've made called Plotting Dimensions, was actually a direct response to something that Stephen Hawking said at a conference in Norway. And it was when he was referring to, for humanity to survive, we may have to look to other planets and further dimensions. But at the same time, we have to be very mindful that we're part of this ecosystem. At the moment, I think we're quite responsible for whether we're going to be here or not in coming times. What always fascinates me is when you go and see something you've made, and it might be sitting on a plinth in a gallery, and you sort of think, oh, I made that. But it's quite interesting seeing it in the context of another environment. Actually getting it to that stage is an awful lot of hard work. You know, a lot of hours and work goes into these pieces, and it's physically hard. I mean, it's quite cold in here in the winter. You're working in noisy conditions. You're wearing face masks. You're working with water, so it can be, you know, quite draining. Every project's got its wall, and you have to actually be able to go past that wall. And you get to the end and you sort of think, would I make that again? Yeah, I would. But if you ask me when I'm halfway through, I might say, oh God, this is really hard work. Can I get to the end of doing it? I find that I'm motivated, I'm able to keep developing when I'm doing the grinding and polishing. Ideas are trickling through your head, how things are working within a particular piece. And it has a lot of positives, because the pleasure derived from being able to actually have an idea and then be able to physically make something, I think is something that's very human. I work with combining organic and man-made structures, and this series that I've been working on for a number of years now is called Eternal Exchange, and it's about the interchange of energy in the universe. It was developed from the ebb and flow of the tides, and also the elements between land, sea and sky that I experienced on some research trips up around the northern coast of Norway. And when I was out at sea on a tall ship 3 times for a month at a time, where I'd be manically drawing, videoing, photographing, painting, my experiences of being in that environment. And it was very much how you weren't quite sure what you were experiencing, whether you were actually seeing the land or the sea or the sky. What I've done is I've developed this way of working where I create a mould, and you can see here, this is how the piece will come out of that mould. So I'm using optical glass, which gives me the clarity that I need to create this volume, which I sort of use as a metaphor for space. And then miraculously, with probably, I don't know how many hours of grinding and polishing, this is the final object. So this object has gone through 8 stages of grinding and a final stage of polishing. And then I apply mirror. It really adds that further dimension to the artwork. It goes beyond the 3 dimensions. There obviously has to be a containment within the object. It's not floating in space, but the use of the mirror gives you that idea that you are going beyond the realms of the 3 dimensions of the object. And the energy is able to enter the piece through the areas that aren't mirrored and aren't painted, as we see on the sides here. And it's how all those different planes are interacting. I wanted it to be completely inclusive, so age, gender, race, religion. The mirror has that connection with everyone, whoever they are. And the Latin word for mirror is speculum, which is to speculate. I'm never 100% sure what's going to be happening inside the artwork until I've finally revealed it, and how the mirror interacts with the optics of glass and the angles of the planes, the form. Obviously, as time moves on, you become more accustomed to knowing what might happen, but I'm interested in that I wasn't expecting this. So throughout my working time, I've worked on sort of developing personal work, which is when I say personal, it's like speculative work. I make it, and then it goes out to a gallery or an exhibition. But also commissions. And what's quite interesting is if I look back historically at my personal work and commissions, they definitely run alongside each other. Whatever's happening in my personal development there will be an influence of that coming through into the commission work. And I suppose that's inevitable, because somebody generally might have seen a piece of my work and think, I think that would really work for this project that we've got coming up. And there's different aspects of working on speculative work to working on commission. I enjoy both processes as much, but they're different. And I think that's one of the things that I like. I like variety in my day. I'm not too much of a absolute routine person. I like the fact that I can decide what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. Obviously, if you've got a deadline, and it's really cold, you just have to grind if that's what you have to do. So it's a constant balancing act, that seesaw. You have your work in exhibitions, and then you get some commissions, and then while you're working on commissions, there's not enough time to develop new work. So it's constant seesaw balance. Our workshop's incredibly important to enable us to make our work. When I graduated from college, it wasn't really commonplace to be hiring spaces, or the working within colleges was sort of in its infancy. So really, it was, if you want to make, you have to have your own studio. So I set up my studio with my partner, now husband, in Stroud. And what we did was as we were selling work, we were investing. And that was gradually built up over a number of years. You could say you're still doing it, because you always need to be doing more in the workshop to keep the maintenance up, new tools, new developments in technology. It's a continuous cycle. Within the artistic practice, you have to have efficiency, because the grinding and polishing and just the creating of the objects is very, very time consuming. So you have to be able to come into work and get on with making your objects. We very early on decided that we needed quite a large working space so that we could work on different projects and accommodate two people's own personal work and other projects. And this has enabled us to make larger pieces, take on larger projects. And sometimes those projects can take a long time. I think the longest one has taken us 3 years. So you need to be able to have the space for the stop-start. And in general, I could be working on maybe half a dozen pieces at a time, because they'll be in various stages. One will be in a modelling stage, one might be a cast, a raw cast like this one here. Another one might just be in a wax like this stage. And for me, it's also important that with the casting process, to have that time to reflect and think and develop. Location was obviously very important for us as well, and we made the decision to stay in Stroud because it has a very high density of creatives, artists, craft practitioners and other creative industries. It's also got a fantastic landscape around it as well, and a relatively good proximity for London, so keeping the reality check in terms of where we can get to in the country for aspects relating to our work. So over the years I have this continuous conversation with myself about the why I'm making what I do, and keeping it all going, which isn't easy at times, but I think art has always been my thing. There's nothing that excites me more than seeing a good line or a good crack in the pavement, or just those visual cues and how much they have to do with the whole of sort of life and everything that we're wrapped up in. And I think for me it's just the joy of making. I think it's just part of my life. It's what I do, and I can't really imagine doing anything else. I do still love coming into the workshop and rolling my sleeves up and putting my face mask on and getting my hands into a bucket of plaster. It keeps your mind fresh, it keeps your mind busy, and it keeps you inquiring. One thing that I think has also kept me fresh is because it can be quite isolating working just with yourself, or I'm sharing the studio with my husband, so there is someone else around. But I have taught all the while. At first I taught in this country at Buckinghamshire Chilterns University College and at University of Creative Arts in Farnham, but also at the Royal Danish Academies of Fine Arts and Design in Denmark. I still do just the Danish teaching now. I go out there once a year to their specialist glass and ceramics department. And that's fantastic because it's really good to see what new students are doing, and the course there is brilliant in terms of how the students can approach their ideas. And it's really materials based, which is fantastic for that opportunity to still be there. The objects that I make, they're very, very labour intensive. They're quite an investment for someone to want to own one, and they're not an object that you would buy lightly. And so I really want people to engage fully with the objects that they're experiencing. And a fantastic reward is when somebody feels that they love your work enough to actually buy a piece, which then helps us make the next piece. And I think that's something also to consider, that, you know, I consider that I love the making process and being able to create something that's tangible. But that I've done my job then. I then want it to go out and for other people to be able to experience it.